The last thing my sister said to me before I cut off contact was, "I'm doing this for the family." She said it the same way she said everything: warm, measured, completely certain of herself. 3 days later, she called my parents and told them I had dropped out of medical school. She told them I was living with a boyfriend who had a drug problem. She told them I was too proud to ask for help, too far gone to be reached. None of it was true. Not a single word. My parents blocked my number on a Tuesday night. My mother sent back my handwritten letter unopened with her own handwriting on the envelope. My father told my aunt to stay out of it. That was 5 years ago. I'm a trauma surgeon. I save lives for a living. I make decisions in the space between heartbeats, and I make them right, because the alternative is someone dying on my table. Last January, at 3 in the morning, my pager went off. Level 1 trauma. Motor vehicle collision. Single female, 35. Hemodynamically unstable. I badged into the trauma bay, picked up the intake tablet, swiped to the patient chart, and I stopped walking. Because the name on that chart was Leah Doran. My sister. Before I tell you what happened next, take a moment. If this story is already pulling at something in you, subscribe. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to know where you are right now. Now let me take you back to where this really started. Not 5 years ago. Much further than that. My name is Leah Doran. I'm 32 years old. I'm the chief of trauma surgery at Mercyhurst Medical Center in Hartford, Connecticut. That sentence took 11 years to become true. Growing up in Millbrook, Connecticut, there were 2 daughters in the Doran house. My sister Diana was 3 years older. She knew how to fill a room: school plays, student council, the kind of girl who could make a dinner table feel like a performance and make every adult in the room feel chosen for the audience. My parents, Martin and Carol, adored her for it. I was the other one. Not difficult, not rebellious, just quiet in a way that adults in my family seem to interpret as fine and settled, and she doesn't need as much. I had my nose in a biology textbook at Thanksgiving while Diana held court. I was the one who researched college scholarships at the public library computer. The chair wobbled every time I typed, one uneven leg. And I never said a word to anyone because I had already understood, by the time I was 15, that if I waited for my parents to fund a future, I'd be waiting forever. Diana's activities were funded. My applications were my own business. I won a state science fair in 8th grade. The same weekend, Diana had a community theater performance. One guess where my parents went. When I came home with a second-place ribbon, my father looked at it the way you look at junk mail before you throw it away. "That's nice, Leah." He never asked what my project was about. Not then. Not ever. But I kept going. AP classes, research internships. A 4 I built alone at a kitchen table while the rest of the house watched Diana's audition tapes. The day I got into Cascade Medical School, a real medical school, competitive, 3,000 miles from Millbrook, something shifted. My father read the acceptance letter at the kitchen table. His eyebrows moved. He looked up from the page, and for the first time in 18 years, he looked at me the way he always looked at Diana. Like I was worth looking at. "Maybe you'll actually make something of yourself," he said. It wasn't a compliment, but it was the closest thing I'd ever gotten from him. I held on to it like oxygen. The day I arrived at orientation, they gave us our first hospital IDs. Mine had my name, Leah Doran, M1, printed in plain block letters on a white card with a blue stripe. I held it for a long time before I clipped it on. Not because I was proud. Because something about seeing my name in print, my name, the thing that existed whether or not anyone in Millbrook acknowledged it, made the 3,000 miles feel like exactly the right distance. I tucked it into the breast pocket of my white coat. The coat was stiff. It still smelled like the packaging. I had no idea, standing in that orientation hall, that someone back in Connecticut was already watching to see how far I'd go and planning what to do about it. Diana had always been good at positioning. That's what I call it now. I had other words for it at the time, but positioning is the accurate one. She understood that attention was a finite resource, and she managed it the way other people manage money: carefully, strategically, and always with an eye toward what she stood to gain. Here's what that looked like in practice. The first thing you need to know: in my junior year of high school, I got a part-time job at the hospital lab downtown. 12 hours a week, filing specimens, cleaning equipment, observing anything they'd let me observe. I saved every dollar. That spring, I applied for the West Haven Scholars Program, a summer research internship, at a university 3 states over. Full scholarship, highly competitive. The kind of thing that gets into med school applications. I got it. I was the only student from our county who'd ever gotten it. I told my parents at dinner. My father nodded once and reached for more bread. My mother said that was wonderful, and then asked Diana if she'd heard back about the summer theater workshop in Boston. Diana had. She was going. The deposit was $300. My mother wrote the check that night. My internship had a full scholarship. I'm not saying they should have paid for something I already had covered. I'm saying the check was written in 30 seconds, and what I just told them required something they didn't have attention they'd already spent. I drove myself to the airport that summer. Nobody came to drop me off. The chair at the lab computer still wobbled. I still never said anything. The second thing, third year of undergrad, Diana moved back home after a breakup. She'd been living in Boston, working in marketing. The breakup was real, and the pain was real, and I don't discount that. But what happened in the 6 months that followed was something I didn't understand until much later. Diana moved into what had been my childhood bedroom. My parents converted their guest room into her space, new mattress, new curtains, a small TV. I was still in college. I called home once a week, sometimes twice. During those 6 months, my mother would answer, and Diana would be there crying, recovering, needing, and the call would end in 4 minutes because your sister's having a rough time, Leah. Not unkindly, just efficiently. I wasn't angry then. I understood. I kept going. What I didn't understand was that Diana was watching me the way you watch someone you've decided is a competitor. I thought she was healing. She was recalibrating. The night I told her I'd gotten into Cascade Medical School, she called me 3 times a week for the next month. How's packing? Who's your roommate? What are your professors like? She remembered every name I mentioned. She asked follow-up questions. She was interested in a way she had never been before. I thought my sister was finally seeing me. I was feeding her ammunition. The third thing, and this one I need you to stay with me for. My best friend at Cascade was Kate Brennan. She'd grown up in foster care, no family, no safety net, and she was the single reason I survived the first year. When I called home during anatomy exam week, and my mother said can't talk, Diana's having a rough day at work, it was Kate who sat on our apartment floor with me at midnight and said, "Their loss. Now get up. We have cadavers to memorize." Kate was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in August of my 3rd year. No family, just me. I went to the dean's office the next morning, explained the situation, and showed the documentation. He approved a formal medical leave of absence 1 semester. Caregiver status, paperwork filed, my spot held. I will return in January. It was all documented, all legitimate. I called Diana to tell her. I don't know why. Maybe I still believed in the sister she'd been pretending to be. Her voice was warm, sympathetic. She said, "Oh, Leah, I'm so sorry. Take all the time you need. I won't say a word to Mom and Dad, you know they'd just worry." 3 days later, she called them. I didn't know the exact words she used that night. I wouldn't learn the full scope for 5 years. But the damage was instant. The call came at 11 o'clock. I was sitting beside Kate's hospital bed. She'd had a reaction to chemo. They'd admitted her overnight. My phone lit up. "Dad, your sister told us everything." His voice was flat. The temperature of concrete, the dropping out, the boyfriend, all of it. "Dad, that's not." Monica showed us the messages. She showed us proof. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. "What messages? What proof?" "Dad, I'm sitting in a hospital right now. I'm taking care of my friend. I filed a leave of absence. I can show you the paperwork. I can give you the dean's number." Diana said you'd have a story ready. A pause. The weight of 5 words. She said, "You'd have a story ready." My mother's voice, shaking. "How could you lie to us for a whole year, Leah?" "Mom, please listen to me." "Enough. Dad again. Don't call this house until you're ready to tell the truth." The line went dead. Kate's IV beeped on the other side of the curtain. My phone screen still showed the call duration. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That's how long it took my parents to erase me. 20 minutes later, a text from Diana. "I'm sorry, Leah. I had to tell them. I couldn't keep your secret anymore." She included a broken heart emoji. I sat on that hospital floor for a long time after that. Not crying. The crying would come later. Right then, I was looking at Kate through the curtain, the slow rise and fall of her chest, the drip of the IV, and I was thinking about how she had no one, and how I had just become the same. Outside the window, Portland was dark. The street lamps made the rain look orange. I had $46 in my checking account. I had a dying friend in the next room. And I had just become no one's daughter. I tried everything I could from 3,000 miles away with no money and a dying friend in the next room. Over 5 days, I called my parents 14 times. The first 3 went to voicemail. By the 4th, my father's number had blocked me. My mother blocked me 2 days later. I sent 2 emails, one short, one long. The long one had my leave of absence paperwork attached as a PDF. The dean's phone number. Kate's oncologist's name. Every piece of documentation a reasonable person would need. Neither email received a response. I wrote a handwritten letter, mailed it priority from Portland. 5 days later, it came back. Returned to sender. Unopened. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the envelope. I called Aunt Claire, my father's sister, the only person in our family who'd ever treated both of us the same. She called my father that evening. I know because she called me back 40 minutes later, her voice heavy. He told me to stay out of it, sweetheart. He said you've made your bed. She'd tried to tell him about the leave of absence. He'd hung up on her. 5 days, 14 calls, 2 emails, 1 letter, 1 intermediary. Every single attempt rejected, blocked, or returned. On the 6th day, I stopped calling. Not because I gave up, because I understood, for the first time clearly, what I had always felt but never let myself believe. They had already made their choice. Diana hadn't manufactured a lie from nothing. She had handed my parents permission to do what had always been easier. I learned the full scope of what she'd done from Aunt Claire, in pieces, over the years that followed. At every family gathering, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Diana performed the role of the grieving older sister. "We don't really talk about Leah," she'd tell cousins, her voice soft with practiced sorrow. "It's too painful for Mom and Dad." She'd shake her head, lower her voice, let the silence do the work. But she didn't stop at silence. She told our grandmother I was homeless. She told our uncle's wife she'd heard from mutual friends that I was in and out of rehab. She told my mother, on Christmas Eve 2 years after I'd left, that she had tried to reach out and I had refused, that I was the one who'd cut them off. She flipped the entire story. "I've begged Leah to come home," she told them at Thanksgiving once, Aunt Claire reported, voice tight with fury. "She won't even answer my calls. I think she hates us." Meanwhile, I was 3 floors deep in an operating room, learning how to save a liver. The genius of it, and I use that word with complete contempt, was this. Diana didn't need my parents to forget me. She needed them to believe I had abandoned them. Their grief became proof. Their silence became justified. And she remained exactly what she'd always been, the loyal one, the one who stayed. Adam told me something else, 6 months before all of this. He'd been sitting on it for 2 years. We were having coffee in the kitchen. He set his mug down carefully, the way he does when he's about to deliver bad news, in his quiet, deliberate way. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said. 2 years ago, I got a call from HR at your hospital. Someone using a fake name had contacted them, asking about your employment status, whether you'd ever been disciplined, whether your credentials were legitimate. I stared at him. I had a colleague trace it. The IP address came back to Hartford. The kitchen went very quiet. The coffee maker hissed. "She was trying to find something," I said. "Anything," he confirmed. "Anything she could use to keep the story alive." She hadn't found anything. There was nothing to find. I wrapped my hands around my mug and felt the heat bleed through the ceramic. That was the moment I stopped thinking of what Diana had done as betrayal. Betrayal happens once. What Diana had built was an architecture. Load-bearing walls, reinforced beams, 5 years of brickwork. And she'd spent every year since making sure none of it cracked. "That's not sibling rivalry," Adam said, his hand over mine. "That's something else." He was right. And I had made peace with it, in the quiet, imperfect way you make peace with things you can't change. I had a life. I had Adam. I had work that mattered. The architecture Diana had built was her problem now, not mine. And then, at 3 in the morning, my pager went off. The roads were empty and wet, that particular shade of January black that Connecticut does better than anywhere. I drove to the hospital the way I always drive to a trauma call. Hands on the wheel, mind already in the room, running the probabilities. Motor vehicle collision, blunt abdominal trauma, hemodynamically unstable, likely splenic rupture, possible liver laceration. I'd done this surgery 100 times. I badged in through the ambulance bay, walked to the trauma bay. My team was assembling. I picked up the intake tablet, swiped to the patient chart. I stopped walking. Patient: Leah Doran, Dob, the 14th of March 1990. Emergency contact: Martin Doran, father. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, I wasn't a surgeon. I was a 26-year-old sitting on a hospital floor in Portland, phone still warm in my hand, listening to a dial tone. Dr. Doran. My charge nurse, a woman named Sandra, appeared at my shoulder. You okay? I looked up. Set the tablet down. Fine. Prep Bay 2 and page Dr. Reeves. I want him on standby. The ambulance siren wailed outside, getting closer. And behind it, I already knew, were 2 people I hadn't faced in 5 years. The stretcher came fast. Diana was strapped down, unconscious, oxygen mask fogging with shallow breaths, blood on her shirt, one hand hanging limp off the side rail. Behind the paramedics running came my parents. My mother looked like she'd aged a decade. Hair thinner, face drawn. She was in a bathrobe, slippers on the wrong feet. My father was in flannel and jeans, thrown on in a panic. His face was the color of old paper. That's my daughter, he said, pushing toward the triage desk. I need to talk to whoever's in charge. Sandra, who has worked 3 floors with me for 4 years, put both hands up. Sir, the trauma team is already here. The chief is handling this personally. The chief? My father grabbed Sandra's arm. Get me the chief now. Sandra glanced through the glass partition toward the trauma bay. She looked at me. She read my badge. Her eyes widened for exactly 1 fraction of a second. I gave a small shake of my head. Not now. She composed herself. Sir, the chief is preparing for surgery. You'll be updated as soon as possible. The waiting room is this way. My parents were led down the hall. My mother was whispering with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. My father kept turning back, looking through every window he passed. She's all we have, he said to no one in particular. Please, she's all we have. I heard it through the partition glass. She's all we have, as if I had never existed. I stepped into the scrub room alone. 30 seconds. That's all I allowed myself. I turned on the faucet, let the water run hot over my hands, looked at my reflection in the stainless steel above the sink, distorted, warped, the way everything felt right now. I took off my ID badge and set it on the shelf above the sink. Looked at it. Leah Doran, MD, fax, Chief of Trauma Surgery. The woman who had made that badge possible was Kate Brennan, who died on a Sunday morning in December with me as the only person in the room. The badge existed because Kate had believed in it before I did. Diana had once called it the badge of a dropout. This was what she'd told my parents. That I'd fabricated the whole thing. That the hospital ID in my social media photo was a prop. That I was performing a life I didn't actually have. I put the badge back on. There was a woman on that table with a ruptured spleen and what looked like a grade 3 liver laceration. She was losing blood faster than we could replace it. She would die in the next 30 to 40 minutes if the best surgeon in this building didn't operate. The best surgeon in this building was me. I paged Dr. Reeves directly. I have a conflict of interest. The patient is a family member. I'm disclosing it now and documenting it in the chart. If at any point my judgment is compromised, you take the lead. No questions asked. His voice was steady. Understood, Chief. Everything by the book. Everything on paper. Then I pulled on fresh gloves, pushed through the OR doors, and looked down at my sister's face. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. For 3 seconds, she wasn't the woman who had dismantled my life. She was a body on my table. That was exactly how I needed her to be. Let's go. Scalpel. 3 hours and 43 minutes. That's how long it took to rebuild what the steering column and the red light had torn apart. Ruptured spleen, we took it out. Grade 3 liver laceration repaired with precision sutures, layer by painstaking layer. Internal bleeding from 2 mesenteric vessels clamped, cauterized, controlled. I didn't speak unless I needed to. Suction. Clamp. Lap pad. Retract. My hands moved the way they've been trained to move. Steady. Deliberate. Fast when speed mattered. Slow when precision mattered more. At 6:51 inches the morning, I placed the final closing stitch. Diana's vitals were stable. BP normalized. Output clear. She was alive. Dr. Reeves, who had stood silently in the corner the entire time, pulled his mask down. Leah, quietly, that was flawless. You want me to talk to the family? I peeled off my gloves, dropped them in the bin. Washed my hands automatic, methodical, the same way I'd done it 10,000 times before. No, this one's mine. I need to stop here for just a moment. Because what I'm about to tell you is the part of this story that I've replayed the most. Not for satisfaction, not for closure, but because it's the clearest picture I have of what 5 years of silence actually looks like when it walks into a room. If you've ever been in a situation where your family refused to hear your side, where someone else's version of you was louder, then you drop the word invisible in the comments. If you think what Diana did was worse than a simple lie, type architect. Let's keep going, because what happened in that waiting room? I didn't see it coming. Not all of it. The waiting room had the fluorescent quiet that hospitals get at 7 in the morning. 2 other families scattered in the far corners. A television murmuring weather reports to no one. And in the center row, sitting rigid, sleepless, wrecked my parents. I pushed through the double doors. Still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down around my neck, scrub cap off, hair back. My badge hung at chest level, printed in clean block letters anyone could read from 6 feet away. Leah Doran, MD, FACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery. My father stood first. Old reflex, the need to be in charge. Doctor, how is he stopped? His eyes had dropped to my badge, then rose to my face, then dropped to the badge again. I watched the recognition move through him like something physical. A tremor that started in his hands and climbed to his jaw. My mother looked up half a second later. Her lips parted. No sound came out. Her right hand shot to my father's forearm and clamped down fingers, digging into the flannel of his sleeve, with a force I would learn later left 4 bruises shaped like fingertips. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds that held 5 years. I spoke first. Calm, clinical. The same voice I use in this room with every family. Mr. and Mrs. Doran, I'm Dr. Doran, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter Diana sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration in the accident. Surgery was successful. She's stable and currently in the ICU. You'll be able to see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Doran. Not Mom and Dad. I watched that land. I watched it cut. Through the glass partition behind me, Sandra and 2 nurses were watching. They knew. I could see it in the way Sandra had set down her clipboard. My mother moved first. She took a step toward me, arms lifting, a sob already breaking through her chest. Leah. Oh my God. Leah. I stepped back. Half a step. Polite. Unmistakable. She froze. Her hands hung in the air between us. Then, slowly, painfully, dropped to her sides. My father's voice came out like gravel dragged over concrete. You're a doctor. I am. You're the chief. I am. But Diana said he stopped. Opened his mouth, I closed it. Diana said, what exactly? He had nothing. For the first time in my life, my father, a man who had never in my memory been at a loss for a verdict, had absolutely nothing. My mother is crying now. Not quietly. We thought you dropped out. We thought she told us. She told you I dropped out. That I had a boyfriend with a drug problem. That I was homeless. That I refused to contact you. I kept my voice level. No shaking. No tears. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the shower, in the car, in the dark at 2 in the morning. I never thought it would happen in surgical scrubs under fluorescent lights. None of it was true. Not one word. Through the glass, I could see Sandra press a hand to her mouth. I called 14 times in 5 days, I said. I sent 2 emails with my leave of absence paperwork attached. I sent a handwritten letter by priority mail. You returned it unopened. I asked Aunt Claire to speak to you. You told her to stay out of it. I wasn't accusing. I was reciting. Facts don't need volume. Then, Sandra appeared at the door. She had hospital business to deliver a message from the board chair, something about last night's surgical outcome, a Physician of the Year nomination committee congratulation. She said it the way she'd say anything routine. She had no idea she had just detonated a second bomb. My mother looked at me, eyes swollen, bathrobe still on. Physician of the Year. It's an internal recognition. It's nothing. I turned to Sandra. Thank you. I need to check post-op vitals. I walked toward the ICU corridor, measured steps. Spine straight. I didn't look back, but I heard my mother's voice behind me, small and ruined. Martin, what have we done? And I heard something I had never heard before. My father said nothing. Because silence, for the first time, was the only honest thing he had left. Let me go back. Because what happened in that waiting room at 7 in the morning was the ending, and you need to understand what the middle looked like, the part no one saw, to understand why it mattered the way it did. Kate died on a Sunday morning in December. Quiet. Just the monitor going flat and pale winter light through the hospice window. I was the only one in the room. No one from my family called. No one knew. I organized a small funeral. 6 people came. Kate's former foster sister drove up from Eugene, 2 classmates, a nurse from the oncology ward who had grown fond of her. I stood at the front of a chapel that could hold 60 and read a eulogy to rows of empty pews. I didn't cry at the service. Not because I wasn't broken. I had been crying for 3 months straight and there was nothing left. That night, I sat alone in our apartment. Kate's coffee mug was still on the counter. Her jacket still hung by the door. I opened my laptop and stared at the re-enrollment application. Then I found it. Tucked inside Kate's copy of Grey's Anatomy, our running joke, she'd kept it next to her bed through every round of chemo. She'd bookmarked the chapter on the pancreas with a yellow sticky note. Her handwriting, shaky but deliberate. Finish what you started, Leah. Become the doctor I know you are. And don't you dare let anyone, especially your own blood, tell you who you are. She'd written it weeks before she died. She knew she wouldn't be there when I needed the push. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. Filled out the re-enrollment form. 2 options. Crumble or climb. I chose to climb, not for my parents, not out of spite, not for any reason that would make a good story. For Kate. And for the version of myself she had believed in before I fully believed in it myself. I went back in January. No family support, no safety net. I picked up extra student loans, took a part-time research assistant position, and ate hospital cafeteria leftovers more times than I'll admit to anyone. Medical school doesn't care about your personal life. Anatomy exams don't pause because your family disowned you. 12-hour clinical rotations don't get shorter because you cried in the supply closet at 2 in the morning. So I stopped crying and started working. I worked the way you work when you understand, really understand, that the only person who will show up for you without being asked is yourself. By the time spring came, I had stopped checking my phone every morning for a Hartford area code. I graduated on time. No one from Millbrook came. I matched into a surgical residency at Mercyrest Medical Center, Level 1 Trauma Center, one of the busiest in Connecticut. And that's where I met Dr. Elaine Voss. Elaine was 58 years old, chief of surgery emeritus. Built like a steel cable wrapped in a lab coat, she had no patience for self-pity and an extraordinary gift for seeing potential before the person carrying it did. She became the mentor I desperately needed, the professional mother I'd lost. 3 years into residency, I met Adam Croft. He was a civil rights attorney doing pro bono work at a community clinic near the hospital. Calm eyes, dry humor. The first person I told the full story to, who didn't flinch, didn't pity me, didn't immediately try to fix it. He just listened. Then he said 4 words. You deserve better than this. That was enough. We got married on a Saturday afternoon in Elaine's backyard. 30 guests. Adam's father walked me down the aisle. I had sent an invitation to Millbrook. It came back the same way my letter had unopened. Aunt Claire was there, though. She cried enough for 2 parents. After the ceremony, Elaine handed me a sealed envelope. A nomination, she said. Don't open it yet. You're not ready. I tucked it in my desk drawer without asking questions. 5 years passed. I became someone they wouldn't recognize. Aunt Claire still called every Sunday. She was my thread back to that world. I never asked about them, but I always listened when she volunteered. My parents were healthy. Diana had gotten divorced 2 years after I left. She was selling medical devices now. The irony was not lost on me. But there was more that Claire was carrying. She'd been feeding me pieces over the years, reluctantly, carefully, like she was diffusing a bomb, 1 wire at a time. What she described was worse than I'd imagined. At every family gathering for 5 years, Diana performed the role of the grieving older sister. She'd crafted an entire narrative, that I was unreachable, that I'd chosen this, that she had tried. She whispered versions of my life homeless, struggling in and out of rehab into the ears of aunts and uncles and cousins who had no reason to question her. At Thanksgiving 3 years ago, Diana had stood in my parents' kitchen and cried, telling them she'd driven to Hartford to look for me and couldn't find me anywhere. I was on call that Thanksgiving. I saved 2 lives. She had built an architecture of lies so complete, so load-bearing, that my parents hadn't needed to think about me. Diana had done their thinking for them. The worst part, Claire told me once, voice low, is that she'd call me too. She'd ask how you were doing. She'd say she was worried about you. And then she'd ask if I'd told your parents anything, and if I had, she'd go to them first and spin it before they could think. She had been managing information for 5 years, running interference in every direction. I need to pause here, because 6 months before that night in the trauma bay, something happened that changed the shape of everything I thought I knew. Claire had mentioned, on a Sunday call, that she'd found something while helping my grandmother sort through old files. She mailed it to me without explanation, just the envelope, my name in Claire's handwriting on the outside. Inside was a letter. My father's handwriting, dated 4 years ago, never sent. I sat at the kitchen table and read it with my morning coffee, and Cleo, our golden retriever, asleep on my feet. The letter was 2 pages long, careful, deliberate. The handwriting of a man who has started over several times and not let himself finish. Leah, it began, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I deserve to send it. But there are things I need to say, even if they only ever exist on paper. He wrote about the night Diana called, the way her voice had sounded certain, sad, worried. The way it had matched everything he'd feared about me, the quiet one, the one who'd always been hard to read, the one he'd never quite understood. He wrote, I believed her because it was easier. I know that now. I believed her because understanding your sister was easy, and understanding you required something I was never good at, patience, time, the willingness to be wrong. He wrote about the returned letter. Your mother wrote your address on the envelope and handed it back to me. I didn't stop her. I've thought about that moment every day since. I held it in my hands. I could have opened it. I chose not to. I don't have an explanation for that. I only have the shame of it. The last paragraph was short. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't think I've earned the right to ask for anything. But I want you to know, whatever you've become, wherever you are, it happened because of you. Not us. Never us. We were the obstacle, not the foundation. And I'm sorry we made you build alone. The letter had no signature, just an initial. M. I held it for a long time. I didn't cry. I thought about crying, considering the shape of it. But what I actually felt was something older and quieter than grief, the feeling of being seen, exactly 5 years too late, by a man who couldn't bring himself to seal the envelope. I put the letter in the drawer, where I keep things that matter. Kate's sticky note. My residency graduation photo, the one with Elaine and Claire. The returned letter my mother had sent back. I slid my father's unsent letter beside them. Same drawer. Different weights. Adam had told me about Diana's inquiry to my hospital the week before I found the letter. The IP address traced to Hartford. The fake name. The questions about my credentials. She hadn't found anything. Of course she hadn't. But the picture, assembled across 5 years, was clear. Diana hadn't told a lie and moved on. She had spent 5 years maintaining it, fact-checking it, fortifying it, preemptively discrediting anything that might challenge it. She had been running a campaign. This isn't sibling rivalry, Adam said. No, it wasn't. And life, in the way life does when it's paying attention, was already preparing the most precise and ironic response. I opened Elaine's envelope 6 months before the night of the trauma call. Inside, a nomination for Physician of the Year. The selection committee. My name. I called Elaine from the parking lot. I told you not to open it until you were ready, she said. I think I'm ready. A pause. Yes, I think you are too. I sat in my car for a few minutes after I hung up. The parking lot was quiet. The hospital lights made the asphalt look silver. I thought about the ID badge in my coat pocket, the one that had started as a white card with a blue stripe and my name in plain block letters. The name that had been there whether anyone acknowledged it or not. 4 hours after surgery, I walked into ICU room 6 for the standard post-op assessment. Morning light angled through the blinds. The monitor beeped in steady rhythm. Diana's eyes were open, glassy, unfocused from the anesthesia but open. She blinked at the ceiling, blinked at the IV pole. Then her gaze tracked sideways to me. She squinted. Read my badge. Read it again. The color left her face in a way I've only seen before in patients who've just been told the prognosis is not what they hoped. Leah. Her voice was sandpaper. Good morning, Diana. I'm your attending surgeon. You sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. The surgery went well. You're going to make a full recovery. You're a doctor. Not a question. A reckoning. I've been chief of this department for 2 years. I watched the spectrum move through her. Confusion, disbelief, fear. And then there it was, the thing I recognized from 32 years of being her sister, the quick flicker behind the eyes. Calculation. Even now, lying in a hospital bed with my sutures holding her liver together, she was trying to figure out the angle. Leah, listen, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me. I nodded toward the glass door, where 2 figures stood in the hallway. You need to explain it to them. I updated her chart, checked the drain, left without another word. I didn't stay to hear what happened in that room, but the entire ICU floor heard it. Diana's room wasn't soundproof, and neither was the truth. What I learned came from the nurses, from Claire, from my parents themselves in pieces, over the following weeks. The moment my parents walked in, Diana started crying. Large, heaving sobs that made the monitor spike. Mom, Dad, you have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. My father stood at the foot of the bed. His voice was barely controlled. Diana, Leah is a surgeon. She's the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital. I didn't know that. She said she sent letters, emails. She called 14 times. She asked Claire to intervene. My mother's voice flat. Is that true? She's exaggerating. You know how Claire tried to tell us. My father again. And this time, his voice cracked. 2 years ago, Claire called and said Leah was in residency, that she was a surgeon. You told us Claire was just trying to cause drama. Claire doesn't know the whole story. What is the whole story, Diana? The ICU nurse at the station outside flinched. Then Aunt Claire walked through the door. Claire had called her that morning not to summon her as a weapon, but because Diana was her niece too, and Claire deserved to be there. But Claire came prepared. 5 years of silence will do that to a woman with a filing system and a long memory. She stood in the middle of that room and said, I have been waiting 5 years to have this conversation. I am not waiting 1 more minute. She pulled out her phone. She had a folder. She'd labeled it, I found out later, Leah proof. Inside, screenshots of every email I'd sent in those desperate first days. The PDF of my leave of absence, signed by the dean, stamped with the registrar's seal. My re-enrollment confirmation. A photo of my residency graduation, me in a cap, diploma in hand, Aunt Claire beside me, the only family member in the frame. She held the phone out. My mother took it with trembling hands. And here, Claire said, swiping, this is from Diana, sent to me 4 years ago. She read it aloud. Don't tell Mom and Dad about Leah's residency. It'll just confuse them. They're finally at peace. The room went still. Diana stared at the ceiling. Her jaw was set, but the calculation was gone from her eyes. What replaced it was something I had never seen there before. The look of someone who has run out of rooms to hide in. You told me to keep quiet for the family's sake, Claire said, looking straight at Diana. But this family hasn't had peace. It had a 5-year blackout. She turned to my parents. And you two, you let this happen. Not because you didn't love Leah, but because loving Diana was easier. Nobody argued. There was nothing left to argue with. My mother sank into the chair beside Diana's bed. But she wasn't looking at Diana. She was scrolling through Claire's phone, reading my emails one by one. Her lips moved as she read. She stopped on the last one. The one I'd sent the night before my residency graduation. I know what it says. I've reread it 100 times in my own sent folder. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I graduated from residency today. I wish you were here. I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter. My mother doubled over in the chair. Not crying. Beyond crying. It was the sound of someone meeting the full weight of a mistake they cannot undo. My father stood at the window, his back to the room. His shoulders shook. Aunt Claire told me later it was the first time she had ever seen her older brother cry. Not once in 62 years. Not at their mother's funeral. Not when his business nearly went under. He cried now, silently, facing the parking lot, while the monitor beeped behind him. Diana lay in the bed. She'd stopped talking. The ivy dripped. Her eyes were fixed on a point on the ceiling. There was nothing left to perform. No audience would believe her. The persona she had worn for 35 years lay in pieces on the linoleum floor, and no amount of charm or tears or reframing was going to put it back together. "You missed her wedding, Martin," Claire said quietly. Nathan's father walked her down the aisle. "Do you understand what that means?" My father didn't turn from the window, but he spoke. 4 words. Low, cracked down the center. "What have we done?" Not a question. He wasn't asking. He was convicting. I came back to the ICU that afternoon at the end of my shift. 22 hours since the pager woke me. My parents were still there. Of course they were. Where else would they go? Back to the house where they'd spent 5 years pretending they only had one daughter. My mother stood the second I walked in. Her face was swollen, eyes nearly shut from crying. "Leah, baby, I'm so sorry. I held up my hand. Gently. Firm. "I hear you. And I believe you're sorry. But sorry is a word. It's a starting place, not a finish line." She stopped. "What I need is time." My father turned from the window. He looked like he'd aged 5 years since this morning. "We want to make this right. Then you need to understand something." I kept my voice level. Not from anger. From clarity. The kind that only comes after you've burned through every other emotion, and what's left is simple and clean and true. "I'm not the girl you sent away. I'm not the girl who called 14 times from 3,000 miles away with $46 in her account and begged you to listen. I am someone who built a whole life without you. And if you want to be part of it now, it will be on my terms. Not Diana's, not yours, mine." My father opened his mouth. Old reflex. Then he closed it and nodded. A small, devastated nod. I looked at Diana on the bed. Her eyes were open, watching me. "When you're recovered," I said, "you and I are going to have a real conversation. Not today. Today, you're my patient. I don't mix the two." I left. Spine straight. Steps measured. I didn't turn around. I'm not closing the door. But I'm the one who decides when it opens, how wide, and who walks through. 2 weeks later, Diana was discharged. Her incision was healing. The rest of her, not so much. I chose the location. A coffee shop in Middletown, halfway between her apartment and my house. Neutral ground. Adam came with me and sat at a separate table near the window. Diana walked in looking like someone who'd been hollowed out. She'd lost weight. Surgery plus not eating will do that. And the confidence she usually wore, like cologne, the ease, the performance, the constant slight edge of someone managing the room, was gone. For the first time in my memory, my older sister looked exactly her age. She sat down, wrapped her hands around a cup she didn't drink from, stared at the table. "I'm not going to yell at you," I said. "I'm not going to list every lie. You know what you did. What I want to know is why." Silence. Long enough that the barista called someone's name across the room and it echoed off the walls. Then, quietly, "Because you were going to be everything I wasn't, and I couldn't handle it." I let that sit. "That's honest. First honest thing you've said to me in 10 years. I'm sorry, Leah. I know you are, but sorry doesn't give me back 5 years. Sorry don't put Dad at my wedding. Sorry, don't unship that box." She looked away. Her eyes were wet. Real tears. I've known the difference between her real ones and the performed ones since we were children. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I also called your medical school. Twice. I told them you'd fabricated the caregiver documentation, that your leave of absence was a lie." The coffee shop hummed around us. I stared at her. "Your dean wouldn't listen to me. He protected you." "He didn't protect me, Diana. He believed the truth. That's not the same thing." I leaned back in my chair, took a breath. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," I said, "but I'm setting conditions." She nodded. Small, defeated. "You will tell the truth, the full truth, to every family member you lied to, every aunt, every uncle, every cousin who spent 5 years thinking I was in rehab or living on the street. You correct every single story." "I will. In writing. An email to the family group. All 47 people. Claire will confirm everyone receives it." Another nod. "And Diana," I waited until she looked at me. "If you do this, and I mean all of it, not a version of it, we can try to build something new. Not what we had. I don't want what we had. Something different. Something honest." She held my gaze for a long moment. "Okay," she said, not enthusiastically, not with relief. Just, "okay." Which was more than I'd expected, and exactly what I needed to hear, I met with my parents separately the following week. Adam drove me. We sat at their kitchen table, the same table where my father had read my acceptance letter. The same table where Diana had smiled with just her mouth all those years ago. "I'm open to rebuilding," I said, "but I need both of you to do something first. Family counseling. Not for me. For yourselves. You need to understand why you believed a lie about your own daughter, and never once picked up the phone to check." My father's jaw tightened. "We don't do that in this family." "That," I said, "is exactly why we're here." My mother put her hand on his arm. "Martin, please." He looked at her, then at me. Something behind his eyes cracked. Not open, not yet, but it cracked. Fine. I stood to leave, then turned back. "One more thing. Adam's father walked me down the aisle. That happened. We can't undo it. But if you want to know your future grandchildren, you start now. Not with grand gestures. With consistency." I picked up my coat. Apologies expire. Boundaries don't. That's the difference between sentiment and structure. 1 month later, the Physician of the Year Gala. 200 people in the ballroom of the Hartford Marquis Hotel. Surgeons, department heads, board members, donors. Crystal glasses, name tags on lanyards. A string quartet playing something classical that nobody was listening to. I wore a simple black dress. Adam was at a front table looking like he was born in a suit. Elaine Voss sat beside him, arms crossed, the faintest smile on her face, the one she reserves for moments she's been engineering for years. The MC stepped to the podium. This year's Physician of the Year, a surgeon whose clinical excellence, composure under pressure, and commitment to her patients have set a new standard for this institution. Dr. Leah Doran, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Applause. Standing ovation from my surgical staff. I walked to the stage. Spotlight warm, podium solid under my hands. I kept it short. 5 years ago, I almost quit. Not because I couldn't do the work, but because I lost the people I thought I needed to keep going. What I learned is that the people you need aren't always the ones you're born to. Sometimes they're the ones who choose you. I looked at Elaine, at Adam. My team is in the 3rd row. Then I looked toward the back of the ballroom. Last row. 2 seats that Claire had quietly arranged. My parents. My mother in a navy dress she'd probably bought that week. My father in a tie he clearly hated. Both sitting with their hands in their laps, looking up at the stage with expressions I can only describe as grief and pride waging war on the same face. And sometimes, I said, the ones you're born to find their way back. Late, but here. My mother covered her mouth. My father stood. Applause filled the rest. After the gala, my father found Adam near the coat check. He stood in front of my husband for a long moment. "I owe you an apology. I should have been the one to walk her down." Adam extended his hand. "With all due respect, sir, you should have been a lot of things. But we're here now." They shook hands. My father's eyes were red. He didn't let go right away. Diana sent the email on a Wednesday night. Claire confirmed delivery to all 47 addresses. I didn't read it until the next morning. Adam brought me coffee and set the laptop on the kitchen table without a word. 3 paragraphs. No excuses. No flowery language. Just the facts, laid bare. She had lied about my leaving medical school. She had fabricated evidence. She had maintained the deception for 5 years. She had deliberately prevented our parents from learning the truth. She had tried to have my medical credentials challenged with false testimony. The last line, "Leah never abandoned this family. I made sure they believed she did. That is entirely on me." The responses came in waves. Our uncle's wife called Claire in tears. She'd repeated Diana's rehab story at a book club 2 years ago. Our cousin David in Vermont sent Diana a 1-line reply. "I don't know who you are anymore." Our grandmother Nana June, 89, the matriarch who'd stopped asking about me at Thanksgiving, because Diana told her it was too painful, called me directly. Her voice was paper-thin but furious. "I am 89 years old. I have never been lied to so thoroughly by my own blood. Leah, forgive an old woman for not seeing it." "There's nothing to forgive, Nana. You were lied to. We all were." Nobody organized a boycott. Nobody sent group texts declaring Diana dead to them. But the trust she'd spent 35 years accumulating, the currency she'd been spending since childhood, was gone. You could feel it in the silence after her email, in the replies that didn't come, in the invitations that quietly stopped arriving. No one punished Diana. They just stopped believing her. And for someone who had built her entire identity on being believed, That was punishment enough. My parents started counseling in February. A therapist in West Hartford, calm, direct, the kind of professional who doesn't let you dodge a question. My mother took to it immediately. She'd been carrying the weight of her passivity like a stone in her coat pocket, and the first time the therapist named it, enabling through silence, she broke down in the office and didn't stop crying for 40 minutes. My father struggled. He went. He sat in the chair. He answered in as few words as possible. But he went. Every week. Without being asked again. That might have been the first real sign of change. 3 weeks into counseling, my mother mailed me a letter. Handwritten. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. I failed you, she wrote. Not just when I believed Diana, but every time I chose peace over fairness. Every time I let your father's certainty decide what was true. Every time I saw you standing in the doorway quiet, waiting and told myself you were fine, because it was easier than admitting I wasn't brave enough to fight for you. I read it at the kitchen table. Cleo was asleep on my feet. Adam was in the next room, pretending not to listen. I held the letter for a long time. Then I opened the drawer where I keep things that matter. Kate's sticky note. The residency graduation photo. The unsent letter from my father. The returned envelope in my mother's handwriting. I placed my mother's letter inside. Same drawer. Different side. Progress isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just rearranging what you carry. I'm sitting in my office at Mercy Rest now. It's late. The hallway outside has that particular stillness hospitals get after the last visitors leave and before the night shift energy kicks in. My name is on the door. My diplomas are on the wall not because I need to see them, but because the residents do. On my desk, a framed wedding photo. Adam, Elaine, Aunt Claire. 30 guests. A backyard in October light. No parents in the frame, but on the bookshelf beside it, a new photo, taken 3 weeks ago. My parents are standing on my front porch in their winter coats. My father's hands are in his pockets. My mother is mid-smile, trying too hard, but trying. It's awkward. It's imperfect. It's real. I reach into my coat pocket and take out my badge. Leah Doran, MD, Fax, Chief of Trauma Surgery. I've been carrying this badge, this exact version of it, this title, this name for 2 years. I clipped it on for the first time and thought about the white card with the blue stripe. The orientation hall. The stiff coat that smelled like packaging. I thought about holding that first badge and understanding, standing 3,000 miles from home, that my name existed whether anyone in Millbrook acknowledged it or not. Diana once told my parents that badge was fake, that the name on it was a lie, that I was performing a life I didn't have. She said it with absolute certainty. The certainty of someone who has never had to build anything. I look at the badge now and I think about Kate, who handed me a sticky note and believed in my name before I did. I think about Elaine, who handed me a sealed envelope and told me to wait until I was ready. I think about Adam's father, who walked me down an aisle that my own father should have walked. I think about the drawer in this desk, the things I carry, the unsent letter, the returned envelope, the sticky note with shaky handwriting, my mother's letter, same drawer, different weights, all of it is true. My name is Dr. Leah Doran. And the woman on that operating table, the one who spent 5 years dismantling me, who fabricated evidence and whispered lies and tried to have my credentials revoked, she is alive right now because of me. She carries my surgical scar on her body. 7 inches left upper abdomen, fading from red to white over the coming year. Every time she dresses, every time she catches her reflection, she will see the mark left by the sister she tried to erase. The sister who, when it mattered most, held a scalpel with steady hands and chose the oath over the anger. That's not forgiveness. That's just who I am. I clip the badge back on. If you're watching this and you see yourself in this story, whether you were the one who was silenced or the one who did the silencing, I want to tell you something. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 days or 5 years. The truth has a patient way of showing up exactly when it's needed most. You can't rush it, but you can't outrun it either. I didn't get revenge on my sister. I didn't need revenge. I became someone who didn't need it. And that turned out to be the most devastating response of all. Not a scheme, not a plan. Just a life fully, deliberately, exactly lived on my own terms. If you've ever built something alone while someone else told everyone you were nothing, type built in the comments. If you were ever the invisible one, the quiet one, the one they didn't worry about because worrying about you required something they weren't willing to spend, type scene. And if you think you would have answered the phone when your sister's name appeared on that hospital chart, or if you're not sure, tell me. I'm still not entirely certain I'd make the same choice twice. What I know is this. I made it the right way. Scalpel in hand, badge on, name in print. That badge has my name on it. It always had my name on it. It just took 5 years and one operating table for anyone else to read it. Sunday morning, first week of March. Light snow. The kind that doesn't stick but makes everything look like it's being gently forgiven. I'm making French toast. Adam is grinding coffee beans, singing off-key to something on the radio. Cleo is stationed under the table, deeply optimistic about crumbs. The doorbell rings. I open the front door. My parents standing on the porch in their winter coats. My father is holding a bottle of orange juice like he's not sure what to do with his hands. My mother has a tin of homemade shortbread, the one she used to make for every school event of Diana's, and none of mine. Hi, she says. Nervous. Hopeful. Come in, I say. Coffee's almost ready. My father steps inside. Look around the kitchen cataloging, the way he does, the house he's never been in, the life he almost never knew existed. He clears his throat. Can I help with anything? I look at him. My father, 62 years old, was standing in my kitchen for the first time, asking permission to be useful. You can set the table, Dad. He nods. Goes to the cabinet I point to. Take out plates. Count them. Look at me. 4. He sets them down one by one carefully, like they might break if he's not gentle. Adam hands him a coffee. My mother hugs me at the stove, not a movie hug. Just quiet arms around me. Forehead against my shoulder. No words. Just holding on. Cleo thumps her tail. Snow falls outside. The French toast sizzles. It's not perfect. It's not the childhood I deserved. It's not the reconciliation movies promise. But it's real. And reality is more than I had for a very long time. My name is Dr. Leah Doran. I am 32 years old. And I am finally, slowly, carefully letting myself be someone's daughter again. 4 plates. It's a start. If this story resonated, if it made you think about your own family, your own boundaries, someone you've lost and found, leave me a comment. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have opened that door? And if you want more stories like this, check the description for one I think will stay with you just as long. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time. The most painful part of this story wasn't the lie. It was how little resistance the lie met. Because sometimes a family doesn't lose someone all at once. Sometimes they lose them gradually, quietly, through unanswered calls, through assumptions, through the decision to believe in the easier child instead of the quieter one. And that's what stayed with people after this story ended. Not the surgery, not the reveal, the realization that Leah kept reaching back toward people who had already started living as if she were gone. This wasn't just about a sister who lied. It was about the child in the family who becomes low maintenance so early that everyone mistakes their silence for strength. The child who learns not to ask twice, not to interrupt, not to need too much, until one day they disappear emotionally, and nobody notices immediately because everyone got used to them surviving alone. People want monsters in stories like this, but real damage rarely looks monstrous. Sometimes it looks like favoritism that nobody corrects. A mother choosing peace over fairness. A father trusting the daughter he understands more. A family slowly confusing comfort with truth. That's what makes this story difficult. Because Diana lied. But the silence around the lie kept it alive. And maybe that's why Leah saving her feels so unsettling. Because she didn't save Diana after receiving love. She saved her after surviving without it. Not out of revenge. Not even out of forgiveness. But because somewhere along the way, Leah became the only adult in the family who understood what responsibility actually meant. And honestly, that's probably the part that hurts most. The people who failed her emotionally still ended up needing her emotionally. The sister who tried to erase her survived because Leah refused to become cruel. That isn't a weakness. That's identity. And maybe this story was never really asking, should Leah forgive them? Maybe the real question is harder than that. If the people who erased you suddenly realized your value, would you let them back into your life? Or would loving them again just teach them they can survive losing you twice? And another question people keep arguing about. What destroys a family faster? One person telling the lie, or everyone else wanting the lie to be true badly enough to accept it? Some people will finish this story thinking it was about surgery. Others will realize it was about what happens to the quiet child in a family that only notices pain once it becomes visible. If you saw yourself somewhere in this story, in Leah, in the parents, maybe even in Diana, stay in the comments for a while, because stories like this usually end on screen. But emotionally, they tend to keep living inside people long after the video is over.